This episode is brought to you by TaxAct. Don't do your taxes alone. Join TaxAct's National Admin Night. Admin nights are social gatherings for getting through your to-do list. So get ready for a night of fun, finding deductions, and filing taxes with TaxAct, where you can file your federal and state return for just $49 through April 8. Let's get together and get them over with. Visit taxact.com/admin-night for details.
Welcome to The Secret Life of Cookies, where we try to solve the world's problems through the miracle of carbohydrates, one recipe at a time, with host Marissa Rothkopf and her dog, Bosco.
On this week's episode, I'm joined by Rachel Vindman, whose life changed overnight when her husband, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, testified at, he who shall not be named's first impeachment hearing. We talked about the good, the bad, and, the surprisingly wonderful things that happen when your life goes from private to public overnight. I was inspired by Rachel's honesty, her fortitude, and positivity. Also, she's a sister in Snark, which made me love her more. We also baked my mom's blonde brownies together. Please enjoy.
Okay, welcome, Rachel Vindman, to The Secret Life of Cookies. It is such a pleasure to have you here, baking in our respective kitchens today. We're making my mother's blonde brownies, which you can call your own blonde brownies. Are you a big baker?
Yes, I am, probably to my detriment, especially during the pandemic.
No.
But I love to bake. I find it very soothing, and it's one of my favorite things. So I was very excited when you asked me to be on your podcast.
And I was likewise excited that you agreed to be on the podcast. So it's a mutual admiration society here. You yourself became a national name sort of unwittingly, I might guess, when your husband also became a national name, possibly unwillingly. Your husband, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who had some things to say during the impeachment trial because he happened to be on a phone call that happened to be with the Ukrainian president and a man named, I think, Donald Trump.
Yes, I believe. I have to go back and check. Perhaps we could Google, but yes.
Yeah, and I think
that is the case, I believe.
And in some places, I've seen you describe yourself, which I think is brilliant, and I hope you still do, as a national security hobbyist.
Yeah, I have no training, so it's really important to know that. I joke that everything I know about Russia, I learned from working in a Russian kindergarten, which is 100% the truth. But, you learn a lot about people. And I think I'm a good judge of people. And it was a nice reflection into society. We had different, most of the employees were from a different class than it was an English speaking kindergarten. So the parents were typically very wealthy, and it was just a fascinating view into modern Russian society. And actually, I almost put this on Twitter today because people are talking about Russia and the new sanctions. But one of the most telling things I was ever told, I was more or less a volunteer at the school because I wanted something to do. And
this is why your husband was situated in Russia.
And stationed in Moscow. Yes, he was stationed in Moscow. So a lot of the teachers, though, they were native English speakers. And there was a time when there was some pay issues. So I went to lobby on behalf of my colleagues who needed to be paid. And I went in, and the accountant was being a little difficult. And I said, this is just not okay. You have to pay people when they work. That's how life works. And more naively, I guess I think that. And I was told, we can have a school without teachers. We can't have a school without an accountant. So that's Russia. And because it's not what they said, it's the absurdity of it, right? That you can have a school without teachers. And that's just kind of Russia in a nutshell. Like, 2 + 2 is not always 4. It just doesn't add up the way you think it does. And so, yeah, my hobbyist, I guess, insight is into a lot of human nature and human behavior, I guess. But please don't take anything I say and make policy out of it.
I won't, but those sorts of insights are the best kind of insights. I mean, the best way to have an insight into a whole culture. Because I think, I know in this country, the way you see parents act in when they're around their children or what matters to them for their children, in other words, school, normal people become a little, what were the parents like? What was it like to interact with them?
Some came all the time. Some, it was just a series of nannies who would, drop off the children. But I think that's, if I were to work in New York City in an upper class kindergarten, it probably would be very similar. So no judgment there. But the parents, some, have made great sacrifices so their children could go to a school where they could learn English, and they saw that as, an entree into bigger and better things. And, but they, like people everywhere. I learned this when I was 24. I moved to Israel. And I think the thing that I learned most of all, I lived there for 3 years and worked with both Israelis and Palestinians. And what I would say is I learned that people are more alike than different. People want the same things in life. The same things motivate me in my suburban Virginia home that motivate a Palestinian woman in Gaza City. Same stuff. That's an important lesson to take everywhere in life. I think everyone should learn that lesson, that we're more alike than different. And
that may be actually good national security policy.
I hope so. Because I think you can always find common ground. You can always find something, when you're trying to talk to someone and, you're trying to, what do? We mirror, we find common ground, we find something common that we can discuss together and go from there. And that's just a really good way to build rapport, but also learn about, what motivates people. And again, I think you'll find that people are generally motivated by the same things. Hopefully they're good things, but
yeah, sometimes they're bad things like greed. Sometimes they're bad things like jealousy that motivates people. But also a lot of times it's baking. Like you could just sit down and sit with anybody, anywhere, like somebody's grandma, they have a memory of growing up in their kitchens, whether it was positive or negative, it's influenced the way they act as adults. And this here in front of me and is a memory of my childhood, which is my mother baked very rarely. And if you speak to my older brothers, they'd say, my mother's greatest baking skill was defrosting Sara Lee. And she was very, it's a great skill. And also I just had a memory of the Sara Lee pecan coffee cake that you would heat up in the oven. Were you ever blessed with that in your house as a kid?
Yes, I know what it is.
But my mom had in her cookbook, like, her own personal cookbook, typed out recipe for these blonde brownies that she must have gotten from someone she worked with in the 60s, right? Because it's beautifully typed on a typewriter. And
I love it.
And they still spelled blonde without an E, which I think was kind of the trend then, if you want to talk about the etymology of the spelling of blonde. And Benjamin Dreher, if you're listening to me, I'm sorry. And I've only amended this recipe by being fancy and browning the butter. So it's basically like a big chewy chocolate chip cookie.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. My family is as well. But going back to the analogy of people, the same things motivating them. It's a shared meal. The idea of preparing a meal and hospitality is so important. And even, Russians on the street might be a little brusque, but when you're in their home, Israelis are kind of the same way, to be honest, not Palestinians, but, native Israelis, like once you're in their home, all bets are off, and everyone, it's amazing hospitality. It's, just showing that love and affection for someone by doing something for them. And, I think you can often see what motivates someone in their home.
Every time I have someone, you remember when you used to have people to your house in the olden days?
Yes,
yeah,
vaguely.
Yeah. I always would be very aware of something that I'd talked to a friend who'd grown up in Israel, and he's like, no one ever came to my parents' house without there being a dish of dried apricots and dried nuts on the table in front of us. There were, no matter what, I don't care what time of day or night. And it makes me think every time when someone would come to my house, I must serve them some snack. There must be a snack somewhere for them to eat. It seems the only right way to do it. So now the great thing about these brownies also is that if you don't eat them all, you can freeze them and you can have them, put them on a platter for someone who, well, if someone ever shows up at your house again, which they might, more likely now than ever. We are, to all the listeners out there in podcast land, I have a bowl in front of me of light brown sugar, and I browned the butter, which means that it turned a sort of nutty brown and it gets a deeper flavor. Does it smell very strong to you, this brown butter smell?
It does. Yes. I was actually just smelling it. Every time I can smell something, I think, oh, great, I don't have COVID.
That's the new standard. If I taste something that's bland, I'm like, oh God, I think I have COVID. And then I'm like, no, it just doesn't taste good.
Yeah. That too.
But it is basically a very, very simple recipe of just brown sugar, butter, 2 eggs, and it's a wooden spoon in a bowl recipe. It involves only the minimalist bit of upper arm strength even, which is good because last night I was dragged by my dog because there was a fox on the street and he really wanted to get to meet that fox up close and personal. And my 70-pound dog decided to take my arm with him. But anyway.
Oh, wow.
Do you have any pets?
We have a fox we have 2 dogs and we have a fox in our neighborhood as well. We have a German Shepherd, Australian Shepherd mix, and we have an older hound dog, greyhound mix. So all the smells, and she is much older, but I can always tell when the fox has been in our yard because, she is she's just very motivated to go and smell it. And her nose, even at 13, still gets her in a lot of trouble and takes her a lot of places. Although she kind of gets away with it more now than she used to, but
now you just let her smell.
Basically.
So the sound in the background you hear is me just stirring. So I hope you enjoy this sound, the homey sound of stirring. So once upon a time, your husband was very happily serving his country, and then all of a sudden he was asked to speak at this impeachment hearing, and things sort of changed. Kind of.
They did. I mean, we were kind of anticipating it, but I remember.
What was the moment?
It was a Wednesday night. We were lying in bed, and he got an email that he would be receiving a subpoena. But we had kind of suspected it, but not really sure what was going on. And things still felt sort of normal for a little bit, in a way. He had already reached out to an attorney.
Was he worried when this all started? Were you worried, or were you like, oh, well, the life just takes its course?
Yes, I was worried. I was worried. So the story, I said it a couple of times, is before that, prior to that, we were laying in bed one night on a Thursday night, and he was like, so did you hear that there was a whistleblower who had a complaint that's gone through to Congress? And I was like, yeah, I kind of heard something on NPR. I mean, busy mom, not totally plugged in. Again, national security hobbyist, so not my day job. And I was like, yeah, so what about it? And he was like, well, it's about a phone call to Ukraine, and it involves the July 25th phone call. And then I immediately knew what he was talking about, only because I knew he had been on that call. And I knew it not because he told me what happened, but just, it was like the day before I was leaving for vacation. And I just, he had to go in early that day. It was.
And the July 25th call, for those of us who have tried our best to block out the Trump presidency as best as possible, was when Trump called President Zelensky to try and do a little exchange, like, maybe you could investigate my friend, Mr. Biden, in exchange, I'll give you some military aid, sort of thing.
Yes. Well, but he would release the aid that had already been appropriated by.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sure. So, that's just a detail, though. Go on.
Yeah. Not important. I remember asking him, because he had to go in early, and I was like, oh, how'd it go? And he just kind of dismissed me. I mean, like, oh, it was okay. I mean, earlier in April, I believe, there had been he had to go in on a Sunday because the president called President Zelensky when he won the race. So I think, it was sort of more, they had been trying to get a phone call for a while, and phone call hadn't happened. And then Alex just kind of assumed it wasn't going to happen. But at that point, things had moved on. Ostensibly, he called because, I don't know, he had won his party had won parliamentary elections or something. But anyway, so Alex tells me that about the phone call. I ended up laying in bed. Oh, he said, and by the way, can you check out my professional liability insurance tomorrow?
That's always a nice way. Good night, honey.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what he did. And he went right to sleep. And that was awesome. And I stayed awake all night. And which always makes things better. I think, not having sleep and worrying about things at night is really the way to go. So,
yeah, because then the next day, everything seems that much more doable.
Yeah. Whenever you haven't had any sleep at all. So I checked on the liability insurance, and then, then things just continue to escalate. The story continued to gain steam. It continued to move on. And then Alex, at the end of September, he took off a week. Again, you commented on my kitchen. My kitchen is a new kitchen because we had a massive dishwasher leak for about 6 months that we weren't aware of. So he took off a week at the end of September. We were working with the contractors because this had been going on since June, and we just wanted to get it done. So he was home. He also was feeling a little pushed out. He hadn't been invited to the UN General Assembly, which is pretty rare because the president was going to meet with President Zelensky. And I remember everything seems to go back to me being a Girl Scout leader, but we were laminating, it was the first Girl Scout meeting. I was going to give him these certificates. So we're watching on CNN, President Trump meet President Zelensky. And I was
you have a daughter, which is why you're a Girl Scout
Yeah, we
leader.
have a daughter. Yes. So she's 10. I guess she was 8 at the time. And so we're sitting here, and I was like, he was helping me laminate. And I said, do you think maybe things aren't going so well because you're sitting here laminating Girl Scout certificates, and you're the director for Ukraine for the National Security Council, and you're not there at that meeting? And I'm really I can't believe he stays married to me. But, I was like, and I think he was just starting, he was he's a very optimistic person. So he was just sort of this, we'll wait and see, maybe it's going to be okay. And I think he will say, and he said this a couple of times, the idea of when he reported it was sort of you really can't do this. He thought they would just go tell him, you can't do this, Mr. President. And there would be a course correction and life would go back to normal. I mean, I think
he was optimistic.
Yeah. And naive maybe. Yeah. But anyway, so things, continue to gain. So we went to a family wedding. We got back on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and there was a reporter at our house. Hi, Greg Miller. And and then it was, from then on, we were concerned. But he got the subpoena. He prepared for the testimony. And I mean, there was even this discussion of, maybe your testimony is not going to be that big of a deal. Should I go with you into DC tomorrow, or should I just stay home? Because it was maybe he's going to be done before lunch. And, it was not going to be, other people had testified. Maybe what he had to say wasn't going to be that big of a deal. Everything was going to be fine. We decided that I would go in with him. I hung out at a friend's house while he testified. But, and this is another story that's been told, many times, but we were at a Girl Scout event when his opening statement was released to HIPSI, was then released to the media. And by the time we got home, our phones were blowing up, and everyone was, and we had no idea that his story would resonate so much with people, with both sides. So I woke up to a whole lot of messages on Facebook and other social media that, were, your husband's a traitor. He's, lots of stuff like that. I mean, lots of support as well from friends, but lots of, strangers reaching out to me. And that's, I think, the moment that we're like, okay, this is real, and our lives are changed forever. And
right. That was my question. Do you realize at that moment, your life goes from lovely, I mean, as public as you get as Girl Scout leader, to when your husband is home laminating with you, whether he should have been or not is irrelevant, but that's a nice family moment, right? And suddenly you go from this private to public. Did you have a sense of how big it would get, knowing that Twitter blows everything out of proportion obscenely?
I still didn't really know. I mean, I would still say I still don't know in a lot of ways, but I don't know. I don't know what the end result is going to be for us. But at every step of the way, it's been bigger than I thought. If that makes sense.
You had told me that you had like your daughter's birthday was shortly thereafter.
That was actually no. It was so that was after he was fired from the National Security Council. So he had his private testimony in October. He had his closed door. He has public testimony in November. Then we had Thanksgiving, winter holidays, and then the day after, the president was acquitted by the Senate. Late that night on a Thursday night, everything happens at night. I don't understand. And we got a call they'd reached out to his attorney and said that he was going to be fired the next day. And so it was like frenzied, getting a statement made. And so then on Friday, he worked all day. And then at the end of the day, they fired him. And his brother, for those who don't know, his brother worked across the hall. He is an attorney, also in the military. And they fired him as well. And I did not know that. I actually didn't know that until they showed up together at home, because I guess they were on the phone on the way home. And then I was like, oh wait, Eugene got fired also? And then the next day was our daughter's birthday party. We were having a cake decorating, speaking of baking, a cake decorating party for 22 little girls. And they went to go get balloons, and they walked outside to some press that were at our house. And they were nice. And, they just said, could you please leave? And, one of our neighbors talked to them and said, could you please leave? And they respected it. But it was, we can't have this affect our home and our family life, or just at least give our daughter this one thing, because who's going to drop off their child at, this house where there are all these people? We had received quite a few letters. We had received, some good, some bad to our home by then. But then there was, I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal that he was fired from the NSC. He was already planning on leaving. We were preparing that he would say he was leaving the NSC and go back to the Pentagon or somewhere. And I just kind of thought it would be a non-event, but it wasn't. And in the Forward, which is a Jewish website online, they published an article in the name of our synagogue and the address of the synagogue. And we got thousands, tens of thousands of letters. They're still in my dining room. I'm just going to be honest. And, so many letters, so much support, and lots of donations made in Alex's name to our synagogue. And we just weren't expecting it. One time they told me, oh, you have some letters to pick up. Can you come pick them up? And it was just boxes and boxes and boxes of letters. They still receive them. I mean, they still trickle in. We were not prepared for that. We had no idea. So that's when I say at every stage it's bigger. It just it's different than what I think it's going to be. So.
And what were the letters? Do you know what some of the letters said?
We read every letter of everyone, both of us. There's a lot of immigrants who tell a great immigrant story or a refugee story. There's a lot that, talk about him being Jewish and just representing, let's be honest, there were a lot of Jewish people involved on both sides. And, so there's expressed those issues. But the number one thing that they talk about is moral courage, and just thank you for being someone that we can look up to. And I just, I was so moved by what happened to you. And lots of emotion. When I heard you were walked out of the White House, and that, again, that's something that I wasn't totally prepared for. I did not think that, I think it was just a bridge too far. People had seen everything that Donald Trump had done, and they were, just couldn't believe that yet another thing, yet another slap. And for a party who purports to support the military, and, but just yesterday, maybe you saw on Twitter, someone said, I can't believe your husband, he should have his pension taken away because of the HIS Act. I assume it's Elder HIS. I didn't look it up. I don't care. But I retweeted it and I was like, oh, guess what? He doesn't. He gets it every month. So I hope this really bothers you. But also there were, Marissa, there were so many times when I let it bother me, and it bothered me so much. And so many, there was one particularly bad weekend after his private testimony. And I just decided at some point, you're not going to get to me anymore. I mean, it wasn't then. It was quite a while after that, after the Marsha Blackburn tweets, after other stuff. But then I was like, I am not, there's a place in me that you're not going to get to because you're not worth it. And
that takes such strength.
Yeah. I mean, because, but it was this thing I remember talking to a friend of mine. She's a nurse. And I said, even last summer, there would be a couple times a week. And I said, I feel like I'm shivering, but it's summer in Virginia where no one shivers. And she was like, that's adrenaline. And there was just always something. And it was always something upsetting. And I realized, oh my gosh, she's right. That's an adrenaline response. And after that, he had made the decision to retire. I just don't want them to bother me. So part of what I said in my tweet is, I don't care. I don't care anymore. Say all the things. Say he's a traitor. Say he should be, all I know is, Matt Gaetz had his phone confiscated and looked through, and Alex never did. So, I mean, or any number of people, if there was a problem, they would have found it and they would have prosecuted him. And this is just silly, silly, silly stuff. They can say it all they want. They can wish things were true, but it's not the case. And you're not going to get to me.
I think one of the reasons that this whole event got to a lot of average folks who sent you loving letters is because when your husband was willing to speak out, we finally all had this like a collective feeling of, oh, thank God, someone in some sort of position of power is finally speaking truth to this event. And we all knew this was possible. And we all had this, I think, if I say, let me speak for the nation or the people who wrote those letters and say that I think we all had this collective feeling of, oh, thank goodness, this is fine. Like what I've been hoping would happen, that someone would speak the truth to this, is finally doing it. And then he got slapped in the face and then he got fired for it. And that's the part where we all just felt crushed. It was we all lived and breathed along with him because he was doing what we wanted, what we hoped to have done. And then what was the result? So I understand why people wrote those letters. We all felt very entwined in that moment.
Well, I mean, I will tell you that Alex is much better at communication than I am, but he tried to respond to every LinkedIn message, to every Facebook message, to on his military account before he retired. He made a point to respond to every person who wished him well. There were some that didn't wish him well, but he didn't respond to them, but he responded to everyone else. And he, I will admit, we haven't addressed writing back to the people who sent the letters because it's just a much more monumental job, but it's easier electronically.
But she's read them. She loves you.
100%. All of that buoyed us. It showed us in that dark weekend. After there were a lot of data points that kind of led to that moment, the weekend after his closed door testimony. But what was hardest was just feeling alone and not knowing how people felt. But then we started to, then things changed. And I remember I was at Whole Foods. We were at Whole Foods. Our daughter, it was Sunday morning. Our daughter was at Hebrew school and we were there and, there were not masks then. And this woman walked up and she was very nervous and very anxious. She was kind of shaking. And she said so sweetly, I don't know which twin you are, which was like the most amazing opening line because Alex's brother, he has an identical twin. And she was like, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What you did was so brave. She was a new immigrant. She had just moved from Serbia and bless her heart, she had to explain to us where Serbia was because I'm sure that's the default thing of like, it used to be part of Yugoslavia. And we're like, we're good. We know where Serbia is. Thanks. But, but I think that's something she always does. Yes, probably again, by default, like what's Serbia? And it was so kind because it clearly she was out of her comfort zone, but she felt compelled to say something. And I think about that all the time. Would I say something? I mean, this happens again, there's masks, but people recognize him and they say, are you Lieutenant Colonel Vindman? And, I would just probably never go up to someone and say it. And I'm a pretty outgoing person, but I love that they feel like they need to. It means so much to us. I mean, I don't have the words to say how much it means to us, but the support that we receive from the American people are really what has gotten us through the past 18 months.
that's the positive message in all of this, because I think so many of us has been trying to, like I said, blot the memory of that man as president and what all happened. But, so it makes it harder to talk to a person like you, who I know whose life has been so impacted by, all our lives are impacted by him, but yours, down to visits to the Whole Food. And your husband now has, is writing his memoirs and is no longer in the Army or with the Pentagon. Well, let me ask the more important question. What's it like to be married to a twin?
Well, I didn't even meet his brother for quite a while. And we never lived near them until they moved here. They live like 3 doors down. Sometimes it's a little bit weird. And I feel like I have almost a sibling relationship with him as well. And he really gets on my nerves sometimes. And I know I get on his nerves as well. And likewise, his wife has the same relationship. She's known Alex since college. They all went to college together. So I'm the, new entry. But they're very different people and yet very similar. So, but sometimes I'll enlist him if I'm really trying to convince Alex of something, and he will help me. Or sometimes he'll say, I can't get through to him. You try to get through to him. But it's a unique experience, but I can definitely tell them apart for everyone who always asks that question. And I've always been able to, but their baby pictures, and just going through, like for his book, going through their child pictures, the people at Harper were like, well, who's who? And we're like, we don't know.
Your husband is writing a book now. Yeah. And when is it?
It's actually under, this is a sticky situation. Do you do marriage counseling, Marissa?
Sure. I'm very good at that. That's what food is about. As long as he likes what we
right. Yeah.
You can talk about anything.
It's true. This is definitely part of my calculus for today. So, not to get too much into it, but it's under review. So it has to be under review for the military because he did have a security clearance. So they have to make sure that, I don't think anyone writes a book thinking, oh, I have secure information, but, inevitably there might be things that the government objects to. So we're going through that process. It's taken a lot longer than we thought. So now we're just wondering if we're going to have to push back the publication date and what that looks like. So there have been words exchanged yesterday and today about we have different approaches to it, but hashtag marriage. So we'll get there. But I think it feels very much, I'll tell you, like I just want to be done with the government. Like, will you just let me go on my merry way and I'll let you, and no hard feelings, and can we just all go on and live our lives? And so every time I think that's done, it's not. And there's one more step.
So that's sort of like you're divorcing the government in your own way. Mm-hmm. Every time you think it's done.
There's one more hearing. Yes, I've never been divorced, but I feel like, we just have to have one more thing to hash out this one more detail. And that's where we are. So yeah, but I don't know how that's going to affect, but it'll be sometime this summer, likely June, hopefully. But it's I haven't read all the book. I've read some of the personal parts of it, but nothing that even mentions the military or to touch on classified information. But it's an immigrant story is what it is. And it's a beautiful story. It's also the story of so many people in our country. And I think this is the time when we need to really be reminded of what the United States stands for and how it's different, why people come here, what the experience and opportunity is like. And I think it does a beautiful job of telling that story, and get a little emotional talking about it. But again, that was such a theme in all the letters in my dining room, is who are we and who do we want to be? And the United States is always changing. We're always growing and changing, but every generation has to kind of define that, is what do we want to do?
And the one thing
who do we want to be?
Right. Who do we want to be? And one of the consistent notes in all of it is immigration, and that we all, new waves of immigrants are coming into this country, all with the same goal. Whether you believe that or not, there are people out there who don't, but all immigrants have the same goal, which goes back to your point of all people under the, when it's all said and done, have the same goals, right?
Yes. To provide for their families, to live, all just the same stuff. Nothing new under the sun.
My father was an immigrant to this country, and he used to get mad at people who would complain about paying taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Because to him, it was the greatest thing in the world. I'm paying taxes to live in this country. It gives us the greatest army that pays for the roads. It makes America what it is. So and speaking, this is being recorded on April 15th, which in the olden days before COVID was tax day. So, so I know it's a pain, but it's worth it in the end because you get a lot of good stuff for it that you don't necessarily get in other countries. But
I totally agree.
You, am I right in thinking you helped write the open to your husband's speech before Congress?
Mm-hmm.
And for what reason? I think that's you wanted to show him for who he really was before the world jumped on him.
I have a couple of good friends who are actually very talented writers. We called, I was like, we have the Suburban Moms Writing Guild helping. So one of my friend, she was a neighbor. She was a local community college English professor, but also just, very talented. Another friend of mine who is a more professional writer. And she was saying, I remember one of her comments, she was like, I was just reviewing the opening statements for DAS Kent, so Deputy Assistant Secretary George Kent and Ambassador William Taylor. And she was like, they're great and they're moving. But these people might have, come over on the Mayflower, and, Alex's story is so different than that. And, we need to tell that story about who he is and what he is and, all of that together. And I thought that was just such a beautiful thing. So she gave me some talking points and, or kind of an outline. We filled it in, Alex filled it in, and his attorneys, looked over it as well. But it was about introducing him and how he came to be in that position. That was another thing. He kind of wanted to explain why he was a lieutenant colonel working at the White House. And I still think there's a lot of people who didn't understand that. Mm-hmm. They're like, why is a lieutenant colonel telling the commander in chief what to do? And it just that was a narrative that caught fire from people who were too lazy to really just read the whole story, or learn the whole story.
But you explained his journey as an immigrant in the open. And I think mm-hmm. that's what really just warmed so many of us up to him and reminded us just how special it was that he was doing what he was doing, right? That he'd made it to that level. You have been part of we have to wrap up a little bit right now. And I have to get my dough in the oven. Have you added the chocolate chip
me
yet?
Too. I have, yes, I did. Yeah.
I hope you didn't measure them.
Extra.
Exactly. Because I think anybody
who measures
chocolate chips and who just thinks a bag of chocolate chips is what you put in an average, I don't know. Though I have a daughter who I will admit to the public doesn't actually like the chocolate chips so much. She prefers the cookie part. I don't know.
Maybe it's the salt.
Yeah, I think she likes that part of it. Anyway, I'll put these in the oven. They bake for a while. They bake up really chewy and delicious, but that's not the note I want to end on. I want to end on a project that I have seen you sort of involved. I don't know if you're involved with it, but this something called, if you'll pardon the expression, the Tiny Pricks Project.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Can you explain to people what the Tiny Pricks Project is?
As best I can. And I'm sorry, Diana, I don't know her last name. I would have looked it up. I mean, I know, but I don't know off the top of my head. But she, receives submissions of people. They will, stitch a quote. Sometimes it's a good quote. Sometimes it's just a ridiculous quote, just to kind of illustrate it, that you see it, not in print, but kind of animated, if you will, or, on a piece of art. And it gives you a different perspective when you see it like that. And she's just incredible. I think it's another medium of reaching people. And again, in a different way. You're not hearing it. You're not just reading it. You are seeing it it highlight. It's like a political cartoon almost, but it's embroidered. And I love it.
And it's perfect for the world of Instagram. And she used what I think was called your favorite poem by Shel Silverstein. And
yes,
I don't expect you to have it memorized, but I'm just going to read the last two lines because it just sort of speaks to, it sort of wraps up this whole thing perfectly, because it is about people being universally the same, which is how much love inside a friend depends how much you give them. And I think why did you pick that? When did you first hear that poem?
Well, I've been a Shel Silverstein fan all my life, so I don't know when I first heard it, but my daughter and I like to read poetry. Poetry is just the arts in general are very popular in Slavic culture. So, while my husband might quote Russian poets, but my daughter and I, we're more Shel Silverstein. That's our jam. But I like to read it with her, and that's just always been one of our favorite poems. But you get out of life what you put into it. I mean, you get out of life what you put into it, but out of yourself. So if you feed the negative and the hateful and you buy into that, then that's what you're going to live every day. And I certainly don't have it all figured out. I hate to give that impression. But I do think in life, everything you go through, keep starting over, keep trying. And as long as you're here, keep making a difference the best way you know how. So maybe I came to this position in an unfortunate way, and Alex did as well. And I know at times he regrets not working in government anymore, but he's, finding a path that he can still help and serve his country, and the country that gave him refuge and welcomed his family from authoritarianism. So whatever voice that he has right now to give that back to the world, to the country, as he's happy to do so. And me, I will give you all Snark, and I won't charge anyone.
Free Snark. But the truth is, you were elevated to this position unwillingly, and yet you're able to send this very positive message to the rest of us schlubs out here. And I appreciate it. And the Snark just adds a little, that song special.
Yeah, it was like a frustrated housewife. But we all have opportunities. And I just think if we have a chance to make someone smile or brighten someone's day or do something good, we should.
So I guess I'll share my brownies with my neighbors then.
Yeah. Share with Cindy and Eugene. He just actually had some dental work yesterday. I don't think he's doing well. So I actually haven't even told him, but I'm going to take half of them to their house. Also, that means half of them are not in our house, and that's good.
And they're
win-win.
And if you cook them to about 25 to 30 minutes, they'll be soft and very gentle for him.
Yes, I did. I did think of that would be a nice thing after his tooth extraction. Yes.
Well, on that note, thank you very, very much for being here. And please keep sharing Snark and good thoughts with us all.
I will. Thank you so much for having me, Marissa.
Thank you very, very much. See you.
Right. Okay. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me and Rachel Vindman for this week's show. For the recipe for blonde brownies, please go to marissarothkopf.com. Thank you for listening through to the desperate plea portion of the podcast, where I ask you to follow me on Twitter so I can build my platform, and publishers everywhere will want to publish my book on the history of the American kitchen. Also, please like this podcast on Apple and bake cookies for your neighbor. Thank you.
Hey, sorry to interrupt your playlist, but this is better than music. It's free stuff. Download TikTok, search/free, and share the link to get items for free. Start slashing now.